I gave my mom an expensive birthday present, but she threw it away, called me a failure, and dismissed me entirely. So, I took back the gift and explained what was inside. Now, she won't stop calling. I want to be part of your life again, she pleads. It all began when I was 12, the day my world turned upside down. That morning started out like any other. Dad kissed me goodbye before heading to his construction job, where he worked as a site manager. Mom barely looked up from her phone as he left. I remember wondering how things had changed so much between them. My name is Melanie Carter, and that was the last time I saw my father alive. Later that day, he collapsed at work, a massive heart attack. I was in school when the principal called me to her office. Mom was already there, looking as composed as ever, her makeup untouched despite the devastating news. "Your father's gone, Melanie," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. I broke down in tears, but Mom remained stoic, patting my back with the mechanical detachment of someone who'd practiced this moment in their mind. That night, I overheard her on the phone with her friend Linda. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the thin walls of our suburban home carried her voice clearly. "Honestly, Linda, this might be a blessing in disguise," she said, her voice low yet deliberate. "Being a widow is so much more respectable than being divorced. And now I get to keep everything without dealing with lawyers." She chuckled, a sound that still makes me shudder to this day. I know. I'll play the grieving widow for the funeral. I've already picked out the perfect black dress." I sat frozen on the stairs, holding back a scream, my hand pressed tightly against my mouth. At the funeral, while Mom soaked up sympathy from family and friends, Dad's sister, Aunt Sarah, stood apart, shaking her head as if she could see right through the act. Aunt Sarah had always known how my mom treated Dad, and it was clear she wasn't buying the performance. It didn't take Mom long to move on from Dad's death. Just a few months later, a man named Richard Thompson started coming over for dinner. He had 2 children from a previous marriage, Brandon, who was 11, and Emma, who was 10. Mom, suddenly transformed, began cooking elaborate meals for them, something she had never done for Dad. "Melanie, honey," she said one evening, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "Richard and I have some exciting news." The way they sat holding hands on the couch, her face glowing like a teenager in love, made it obvious what she was about to say. "We're getting married," she announced. "Isn't that wonderful? You'll have a new father and siblings now." I forced a smile and mumbled congratulations, but my stomach churned. Richard chimed in, "Brandon and Emma are thrilled to have a new sister." Yet, every time his kids visited, their cold, judgmental stares made it clear how they really felt about me. That night, I called Aunt Sarah, sobbing into the phone. She listened patiently before offering a piece of advice that I've carried with me ever since. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the family you choose is far more important than the one you're born into." Brandon and Emma moved in shortly after the honeymoon, claiming the best rooms in the house. My playroom was turned into Emma's art studio. When I protested, Mom dismissed me with a sharp, "Stop being selfish, Melanie. We need to make them feel at home." After the wedding, Mom became a completely different person. She spent hours helping Emma with her art projects or cheering at Brandon's soccer games, while I ate dinner alone in my room. The way she doted on Richard was something I had never seen her do for Dad. "Brandon needs new cleats for soccer," she'd announce. "And Emma's enrolling in art classes this summer." There was always money for them. Meanwhile, even the smallest requests I made, like new school supplies, were met with exasperated sighs and eye rolls, as if I were asking for the moon. Then the family trips began. Weekend getaways to nearby cities or camping trips to state parks were common, but I was never invited. "You'd just be bored," Mom would say without even looking at me. "Besides, someone needs to feed the cat." When they left, I would pack a bag and head to Aunt Sarah's cottage, which felt more like home than our house ever did. "This isn't right, Melanie," Aunt Sarah said one night as I unpacked yet again. "A mother shouldn't play favorites." I shrugged, pretending it didn't hurt. "At least I have you." When I was 16, I carefully brought up the idea of college during dinner. I had been researching business schools and dreaming of a fresh start. "Mom," I began cautiously, "I wanted to talk about college applications." Her fork clattered against her plate. "College," she repeated, her tone sharp. "We can't afford college for you, Melanie. We need to save for Brandon and Emma's education." Brandon smirked, and Emma smothered a giggle. Richard, as usual, said nothing, focusing instead on his food. Later that night, I confronted Mom in the kitchen. "What about Dad's savings?" "He had life insurance, and he was saving for my future," I argued. Mom's face darkened. "I spent that money raising you," she snapped. "Food, clothes, a roof over your head, did you think that was free? Stop being so entitled, Melanie." Her tone was as icy as her words, and it was painfully clear that everything Dad had worked for was gone, spent on her new perfect family. The next weekend, I poured my heart out to Aunt Sarah. She listened quietly before disappearing into her study. When she returned, she slid a thick envelope across the table. "Your father came to me a couple of weeks before he died," she explained. "He seemed worried, like he knew something was coming. He asked me to safeguard this until you were ready for college." Inside the envelope was a bank statement, a savings account in my name, with Aunt Sarah as the trustee. Dad had been quietly saving for years, ensuring my future was secure no matter what. Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in years, they weren't from sadness. "We can't tell Mom," I said, clutching the envelope. Aunt Sarah nodded in agreement. For the next 2 years, I threw myself into my studies and quietly prepared for college, all while enduring Brandon and Emma's constant mockery. "Better start filling out applications at the diner," Brandon sneered one day. "Maybe if you're lucky, they'll let you bus tables too," Emma added with a smirk. I ignored them, my silence infuriating them more than anything I could have said. Graduation day finally arrived. I had barely taken off my cap and gown when Mom and Richard summoned me into the living room. They sat together like judges about to deliver a verdict, while I stood before them. "Melanie," Richard began in his usual condescending tone, "you're 18 now. We've done more than enough for you, but it's time for you to start supporting yourself. You need to find a job and move out." I kept my face neutral and nodded. "I understand. I'll be out by next week." The stunned look on their faces was almost comical. Clearly, they had expected an argument or a tearful plea to stay. Mom opened her mouth to say something, but for once, she seemed at a loss. "Well, good," Richard finally said. "That's very mature of you." Neither of them asked where I planned to go or how I would manage. Their relief at my compliance kept them from asking any questions that might complicate things. Aunt Sarah arrived bright and early on moving day in her trusty blue Honda. I packed my life into 4 cardboard boxes and 2 suitcases, a surprisingly small amount considering how long I had lived in that house. It was as if, deep down, I'd always known I would have to leave. As we drove away, I glanced in the side mirror, watching the house where I'd spent my childhood grow smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared. I didn't cry. Instead, I felt lighter with every mile we put between us. That summer, I worked at a cozy cafe, saving every penny I earned. By September, I was on a plane, heading to Marshall State University to begin my new life. The business program was demanding, but I loved every minute of it. My roommate, Jessica, quickly became a close friend. When I eventually told her about my past, she gave me a tight hug and said, "Their loss. You're incredible." Mom's social media remained my only connection to the life I'd left behind. Her posts painted a picture of the perfect family, Brandon's soccer victories, Emma's art show accomplishments, and their smiling faces on vacations. There was never a mention of me. It was as though I'd been erased. Meanwhile, I thrived. I graduated summa cum laude and had job offers lined up before I even tossed my cap. One of those offers came from Jessica's father, Mr. Reynolds, who ran a prominent marketing firm. "We could use someone with your skills," he told me during my interview. I started as a junior analyst but quickly worked my way up by taking on extra projects and demonstrating my dedication. Within 5 years, I was promoted twice and bought my own apartment in the city. The day I signed the mortgage, I stood in my empty living room, holding the keys in my hand, and allowed myself a moment to cry. These were tears of pride and triumph, proof that I had made it on my own. Then, the biggest surprise came. 7 years into my career, Mr. Reynolds called me into his office. "We're creating a new role," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Senior Director of Strategic Development. The board and I unanimously agreed, you're the best person for the job." The salary was beyond anything I had ever imagined. I didn't broadcast my achievements online, preferring to keep my personal life private. My social media accounts were minimal, occasional posts of sunsets or cozy coffee shop corners. Aunt Sarah was the only one who truly knew the extent of my success, from the promotions to the sleek black Mercedes I had treated myself to. "You've earned every bit of it," she'd say proudly whenever I shared my milestones with her. Meanwhile, Brandon and Emma's social media pages were filled with exaggerated displays of mediocrity. Brandon posed with his used Hyundai Elantra, captioning it with "Living the Dream." #blessed #luxury life, while Emma tagged designer brands she obviously couldn't afford in photos taken at the mall. One post made me laugh out loud, Brandon standing proudly beside his car at a local car show, boasting, "When hard work pays off." #success #entrepreneur. I read it while sitting in my Mercedes AMG, sipping an espresso. It was laughable, but I didn't feel the need to prove anything. Then came the message that changed everything. It popped up on my Facebook one morning. "Melanie, it's your mother. My 55th birthday is coming up, and I'm hosting a celebration at LeBlanc. You probably wouldn't know it, it's a very exclusive restaurant. I expect you to attend. It's on the 15th at 7 p.m. sharp. Don't embarrass me." I read it several times, stunned by the audacity. 12 years of silence, and this was how she chose to reach out? No apology, no effort to mend fences, just a command, wrapped in a condescending jab. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I called Mr. Reynolds, requested a week off, and booked a flight to my hometown. That evening, over tea, Aunt Sarah asked the question I'd been considering myself. "What are you going to give her?" I smirked and pulled out my phone to show her an email confirmation. "A luxury vacation package to the Maldives," I said. 2 weeks at a 5-star resort, first-class flights included. Worth $15,000. Aunt Sarah's eyes widened. "Melanie, that's way too generous. She doesn't deserve it." "Oh, I know," I said with a laugh. "But it's not about what she deserves. It's about the look on her face when she realizes what she lost by throwing me away." "You're a little wicked," Aunt Sarah said, chuckling. "But I love it." On the evening of Mom's birthday, I slipped into a sleek Chanel dress, understated yet elegant. Its simplicity belied the hefty price tag, but that was the point. I hailed a taxi instead of driving my Mercedes, knowing it would play into the assumptions Mom and her family had about me. LeBlanc was exactly what I expected, a pretentious restaurant designed to impress people who didn't know any better. Frozen seafood disguised with gold leaf, overpriced cocktails, and dim lighting to hide the mediocrity. The hostess led me to a private room where the party was already underway. Mom sat at the head of the table, radiant in a glittering dress, basking in the attention. Richard was beside her, with Brandon and Emma flanking them like a royal court. Surrounding the table were relatives I hadn't seen in years, Aunt Linda, who had a habit of pinching my cheeks too hard, and Cousin Rachel, who couldn't stop bragging about her kids. Mom's eyes flicked over me, and her lips curled into a faint smirk. "Melanie," she said coolly. "You made it. Though you could have put in a little more effort with your outfit." I ignored the jab and took a seat at the far end of the table, observing the spectacle as each guest presented their gifts. Aunt Linda handed over a candle set from a mall boutique. "It's from that fancy shop," she said proudly. Mom acted as though it was pure gold. Cousin Rachel gave a spa gift card, declaring, "For some pampering." Mom squealed in delight. The gifts piled up, vases, cookbooks, and baskets of bath products, each one met with exaggerated gratitude. Then came Brandon and Emma's moment. Brandon stood, grinning smugly. "Mom," he said, "Emma and I wanted to get you something extra special this year." Emma pulled out her phone, displaying a photo of a mounted TV. "It's a 65-inch smart TV," she announced. "We had it installed in your living room already." Mom burst into tears, pulling them both into a tight hug. "My amazing children," she gushed. "I'm so lucky to have you." Finally, all eyes turned to me. I reached into my purse and placed a small, elegantly wrapped box on the table. Mom's smile faded. "What's this?" she asked suspiciously. "Open it and see," I said. She snatched the box and tore it open, revealing a simple card with a receipt inside. She stared at it in confusion, then at me. "What is this?" she snapped. "It's a receipt," I replied evenly, "for a luxury vacation package to the Maldives. 2 weeks at a 5-star resort, first-class flights included. Worth $15,000. The room fell silent. Emma dropped her fork. Brandon's jaw hung open. "That's impossible," Mom stammered. "You can't afford something like that." "You're lying." I leaned back, smiling. "You'd know what I can afford if you'd cared enough to be part of my life these past 12 years. But let me update you. I'm a senior director at Reynolds Marketing Group. I own my apartment outright. And that taxi you mocked? I took it because I didn't want to leave my Mercedes parked in this neighborhood." Mom's face turned ashen. Emma's smugness evaporated, and Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "But since you clearly don't want anything from me," I continued, standing and tucking the box back into my purse, "I won't spoil your birthday any further. Enjoy your TV. I hear the resolution is almost as good as the one in my home theater." I turned and left, the sharp click of my heels echoing in the stunned silence. The maitre d' called a taxi, and I returned to Aunt Sarah's house. She was waiting with 2 steaming cups of tea, already placed on the coffee table. I recounted everything as we sat in her cozy living room. "Some people never change," she said with a sigh. "Your mother's always been more interested in appearances than the truth." As we talked, my phone began buzzing. An unknown number flashed on the screen, but I didn't need to guess who it was. "Melanie, sweetheart," Mom's voice oozed sweetness when I finally answered. "I've been thinking about what happened." "Have you?" I interrupted, my tone cold. "Yes. I may have been a little harsh, but I think we can use this as a fresh start. If you're still willing, I'd love to accept that gift." Her desperation was almost laughable. "No," I said firmly. "You don't want a fresh start, you just want the vacation package. And for the record, we're not family. Family supports each other, cares for each other. You stopped being my family the day you chose appearances over me." I hung up. Over the following days, her calls and messages intensified. Each one was more transparent than the last. "Melanie, please. I'm your mother, how can you ignore me? You're such a successful woman. Maybe you could help Brandon start his career. Emma's been talking about interning at a company like yours. It would look great on her resume. The house needs some repairs, and we're struggling right now. You're doing so well, surely you can help. I read each message with detached amusement. Guilt, flattery, manipulation, Mom cycled through every tactic she could think of. You won't believe this, Aunt Sarah told me during one of our calls. Your mother actually showed up at my house demanding your address. When I refused, she ranted about how ungrateful we both were and stormed off. I laughed. Did you call the police? I came close, Aunt Sarah replied. But don't let your guard down, Melanie. She seems desperate. I've blocked her on everything, I assured her. She won't get through. As I walked around my apartment that evening, I took in everything I had built for myself, the carefully chosen furniture, the art on the walls, the city skyline framed by my windows. Every bit of it was earned through my hard work and resilience. Mom's renewed interest in me had nothing to do with regret or reconciliation. She only cared about what I could offer now that I had succeeded. But I had learned something valuable from her mistakes. True family isn't about shared DNA. It's about love, support, and showing up when it matters. And I had found that with Aunt Sarah. The next morning, I called the travel agency and had the Maldives vacation package transferred to Sarah Carter's name. When I told her, she protested. Melanie, I can't accept something like this. It's too much. You deserve it more than anyone, I insisted. You've been more of a mother to me than she ever was. She hugged me tightly, her eyes misty with emotion. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. I had left the past behind and built a life I could be proud of. And now, I was exactly where I belonged, with the only person who had ever truly been my family. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe and turn on notifications to be the first to have radish and real stories with you. Have a great day.